Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to welcome you here to this session. I think we're going to make a start now. Okay, so my name is Nejla Redberg. I work for the Research Data Alliance in Europe, and I'm delighted to have you all here with us for the session on engagement of research communities and service providers in EOSC. So I'm sure you'll agree, this is one of the biggest concerns we have in EOSC, is how to engage the researchers and also the service providers. So I have a very good panel of speakers today. We have 6 people, experts all in different domains and from different backgrounds. We have service providers, we have research communities, and we have infrastructure providers and a whole range of people who are going to give their insights into engaging in EOSC. Sorry, people are still joining, but I think we'll carry on. So the purpose of the session, I thought at the beginning really, is we have lots of different perspectives on how people are engaging with EOSC, and I think we want to have a look at their strategies and how successful they are, and if we can move these strategies forward and keep them going and apply them to different methods and different stakeholders in EOSC. And I'd really like to find out from them what has worked well, what is working well, and what can we take forward. Our 6 speakers, I'll introduce them each as they come up. I'd like to run the session that they all talk for about 10 minutes, no questions in between, and then a discussion at the end, if that's all right with you. I was just going through the SRIA before the session, and I noticed that the word engagement came up 26 times. The word data comes up 750 times, but I think you'll agree that engagement is critical, and it also says that a number of times in the SRIA, that we have to place researchers at the center of what we do in EOSC, and this should drive all the activities. There's also an EOSC task force on researcher engagement, and I don't know if anyone here in the room is part of that or represents that, but I'd also like to give some feedback to that task force from this session. And in their paper, which is very useful, have they also set out and highlight the need for engagement of researchers and community. So how do we do this? How do we go about this? And that's what we hope to produce today from these talks. I'd also like to say that in EOSC Future we have 4 focus groups on engagement, on libraries, on research communities, on national infrastructures, and on HPC. So that's another activity that we're doing that we can also highlight at the end. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. His name is Marek. I've asked not to pronounce his last name, but he is the first speaker because he is a local. He is our Czech native, and he's in Prague, which is great. He's a biochemist, and he is working at the Czech Academy of Sciences. And he has a very interesting focus from the researcher engagement perspective. So Marek, please come up.
Yeah, probably everyone can hear me. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm standing here not as a biochemist, but as a person who is working with material sciences and engineering people. And I'm helping them to engage in EOSC with various RDM issues. One of the reasons why I'm doing it is also that I'm head of Czech working group for material sciences and engineering for the Czech EOSC CZ project, national project. And so the material sciences and engineering domain is rather diverse, but this can be said about many domains like life sciences or environmental sciences. It includes experimentalists and computer scientists, but we've got a little bit of tag on our domain, and it says that we lag behind the engagement in the EOSC or with RDM practices. And I have to say that unfortunately it's true, and one of the reasons why it is so is I don't think that we didn't do our job. I think quite some activities are happening all around the world, and I will only mention a few of them. But what is a critical problem is that the information is absolutely scattered. There is no unifying element in material sciences and engineering domain which would bring all the information to one place. And even if you go to EOSC Marketplace, and if you are searching for the tools for material sciences, they are usually not yet exposed there. Most of the tools which you will find on the material sciences are for computational approaches and for computational tools, and not really something helpful for the community really to start organizing their data in a proper way. So just to show you, we did something. I mean, material sciences and engineering did quite a bit. There are activities like Materials Resource Registry from NIST in the United States, or Materials Commons, which was actually partially under the umbrella of RDA. And DICE is more activity in Japan. This website is to some extent trying to collect more information from various resources. Then there were some RDA interest groups and working groups which were producing at least super basic ontologies or super basic vocabularies for this community, but it is very, very early phase. For example, as a biochemist, if I compare it to some life sciences domains, it's really in its very early stage. And later, when German system started for data management, started this consortia, and again you see scattered information. In Germany, they have 5, or I would even count 6 or 7 consortia into the domain of material sciences and engineering. And these consortia, to some extent, they communicate together, but not perfectly. And they are producing the useful tools. Again, I want to stress, yeah, we are doing quite a bit, but unfortunately, it's again scattered in the websites of all these consortia. And actually, surprisingly for me, in the third round of the call for consortia, another consortium which is perfectly related to material sciences appeared on the list. So next year we will have probably 7th or 8th consortium just in Germany. And I was just mentioning a few of these activities which importantly end up in some useful tools like metadata for ING, one of the products of one of the German consortia, which is only active for 2 months, but wonderfully they built on the Materials Commons activities and continued in the development of vocabularies and metadata models. So it is a useful evolution, but again, it's hidden on their website to some extent, and it's not yet implemented in EOSC and so on. Also, there are various very useful tools from other consortia under the acronym NOMAD, and again, I'm talking to various people because I'm also member of Task Force Upskilling Countries in the EOSC, and there are people from diverse European countries. And whenever I ask about material sciences, whenever they even did some surveys, usually it comes that from material sciences no one knows anything. And as I said, there are things available. So how to deal with it? Well, one thing is, so I applied for a RDA EOSC Future Domain Ambassador, and I was the lucky one to acquire this award. And I will try to create an umbrella where we will collect the information about the available tools for material sciences and engineering domain. The tentative title is Data Materialized, but that can change. But this is really to collect information, and then I promised also to publish a paper, because the usual researchers' way, how we go for the informations, we like to read papers, articles, the usual research articles. So if something we publish in their usual journals, that the probability that they will actually get the information is much higher than presenting on EOSC Symposium or other research RDM-oriented conferences. So this is one way how I plan to help this community. But another is, as I said, I'm active in Czech working group Material Sciences and Technology. The group has now 27 members coming from various Czech universities and research institutes, including research infrastructures. And what is actually, this working group is not similar to food and health, because food and health has some things which they can bring to EOSC, Czech EOSC. Other way around, here we are actually trying to attract new people. Also, especially we are focusing on local institutes and local regional universities, because in Czech Republic, material sciences and engineering is actually a very popular topic. A lot of people are working in this field. So we are attracting really new people to something what is up to now only developed in the big universities such as Masaryk University in Brno or Charles University in Prague. And so I put together these people, and I'm bringing my experience from life sciences and from what I learned abroad about material sciences, and especially what is important, we are sharing experience. And this is improving slowly. I'm speaking to these members of the working group, and also they are then later speaking with their colleagues at cafeteria or canteen. And this is the way spread through speech. We are engaging more and more people into our EOSC, originally EOSC CZ, but we hopefully will bring the big European picture into this community. And thank you for your attention.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Marek. Thank you. So next up, my colleague Beth from the Digital Repository of Ireland, who is working, among other things, on part of the EOSC Future project to engage underrepresented communities for RDA. So I'll get your presentation up, Beth.
All right, thanks very much. So yes, I'm going to talk to you about engaging research communities via the Research Data Alliance. So I'm here on behalf of the Digital Repository of Ireland, but also on behalf of RDA. So you probably don't really need an introduction to RDA, but I'll give you a very brief one anyway for those who are not familiar. The Research Data Alliance is a global organization. And I actually just took this slide from an October 2022 update, and I realized that the number for members and countries has improved since I made my speaker notes. So I will tell you that the number there is probably most accurate, but it's also probably climbed even since they made this slide. There are 12,934 individual members as of October 2022 from 148 countries. The vast majority of these members are from academia and research, but there is also representation from administration and enterprise and industry. So it is an organization that bridges different fields and allows for conversations that I think EOSC is certainly interested in supporting. It is a passionate, active, grassroots community devoted to better data stewardship. And I've got a copy of the mission there, which states that RDA builds the social and technical bridges that enable open sharing and the reuse of data. There's a lot of different ways to participate in RDA and a lot of different structures that help to support the work that they do. There's interest groups and working groups and communities of practice. They have plenaries 2 times a year, and actually there's going to be a plenary in March this year that will celebrate their 10th anniversary, and which we hope to have a satellite event at that celebrates the work of no less the domain ambassadors, which Marek is one of our newest members. I just grabbed this screenshot from the RDA website, which showcases the value of RDA to different communities or sectors, sort of reinforcing the fact that it goes across academia and also researchers, infrastructure providers, service providers, students, individuals, funders, libraries. And then there's obviously the big important one in the middle there. It also supports the European Open Science Cloud. It's kind of identified that as a special industry unto itself. RDA's support of EOSC has been and remains focused on enabling science communities to create tools that they need to enable excellent research and access to data and to promote open science practices and standards. So RDA is involved in EOSC Future, and as part of the EOSC Future project, it has led efforts designed to facilitate improved awareness of open science practices, services, resources available within EOSC, leading ideally to enhanced engagement with open science across disciplinary communities. And one of the main ways that it has attempted to do this is through something called the open calls. There were €1 million that were distributed or is in the process of being distributed because the calls are still, at least one of the calls is still open at the moment. The calls were aimed at engaging a range of stakeholders working on issues such as data interoperability, disciplinary metadata preparation, data stewardship, the kinds of stuff that RDA does excel at. And I think we were going to change this number to approximately 30 funded projects because there's some contracts and stuff that haven't been signed yet. This number will probably go up because I think there's at least 5 more grants that are yet coming still that in a future slide in a couple of seconds, I will show you which one of those calls is still open. The other way the open calls are aimed to improve engagement with EOSC is that they create a pathway to involvement for those who might not necessarily be working with large research infrastructures, or if they're working in disciplines with less support in EOSC generally. And we have successfully engaged 12 disciplines across the various calls, which obviously doesn't represent the whole of the disciplinary landscape, but I think it is at least a good representation. We have also aimed to ensure representation from across Europe, and there are 20 countries that are represented within those funded calls. So here are the various funding categories that calls have been put out for, and this is the one that I mentioned, the call for interoperability framework contributions, which is actually still open and open until December 13th, if anyone in this room is interested in applying. The calls kind of operate on both the large and the small scale. Some of the smaller ones have gone towards individuals. And that could be support for RDA members to act as domain ambassadors, improving the understanding of EOSC services and infrastructure across something as small as maybe their universities, their disciplines, or in some cases in adjacent communities. And we have an example of a domain ambassador who's actually coming from the Fair Sharing community and has created something called the Fair Sharing Community Curators Program that is now tied to the work of EOSC as well. Another call went out for the creation of communities of practice within RDA that specifically targeted participation from across European partners, but there's an example of Moldova being represented in the agricultural discipline. So we were hoping for smaller, less well-funded countries as well. The interoperability framework call is an example of maybe a larger call with a bigger amount of money attached to it. There were also cross-disciplinary science adoption grants that went out, which were aimed at developing tools that can be shared across communities. There is a project, an example of one of the successful cross-disciplinary adoption grants was a project to make Elixir's software management plans machine actionable, overcoming the limitations of text-based documents using RDA's machine actionable DMP application profile as a guide. So it also, there's always a goal of taking what RDA knows and the RDA outputs and of making use of that within these calls as well, so that they can facilitate an improved EOSC. And here's just a screenshot of some of the call grantees that are up on our website thus far. Again, this doesn't represent everybody right now because there's still some contracts being signed and some new faces that need to go up on this page. Okay, so the open calls were about encouraging problem solving and pushing out solutions. But there's still a lot to be learned about just what solutions are needed in the first place. So another piece of the puzzle, in addition to what RDA is doing with its own membership and EOSC Future, is bringing in knowledge gathering across the thematic communities, like basically going out and asking, looking for information about what's happening within various disciplinary communities, aligning their data challenges and requirements with what it is that we're doing. Oh, did I skip a slide? No, I didn't. Okay. Okay, so the RDA is engaged in knowledge gathering and community building exercises aimed at tapping the resource, largely that is the RDA community. How has RDA succeeded in building the social and technological bridges to enable data sharing? How can that community be further encouraged to work with EOSC concerns? And can those efforts, be sustained beyond something like a granting funding cycle? So a few of the efforts that we're putting into the knowledge gathering side of things involves issuing a survey to the RDA membership and conducting one-on-one interviews with experts in research data management in a variety of disciplines about how well EOSC serves their communities. And that survey is actually aimed to go out in the next month, and it'll be open over kind of the winter period to try and get as many participants as we can. We're also aiming at creating a network of domain ambassadors, of which obviously we have a number of funded domain ambassadors, but we'd like to continue to see support within RDA for those who would like to act as domain ambassadors in the future to learn from the experience of the current domain ambassadors. One of the kind of community building events that's going to be upcoming at the RDA plenary, I think I already mentioned EOSC Future is going to be hosting a satellite event in advance of the RDA plenary conference in March to showcase the RDA Open Call's contribution to the global open science commons development. And then there's also going to be a session that draws on the experience of the domain ambassadors and one of our domain ambassadors who is also connected with the fair sharing community, who I mentioned before, Alison Lister. We put in a proposal for a session that's talking about bringing the RDA community to your community. And we're going to talk about experiences and lessons learned about taking RDA outputs and actually communicating them to the various disciplinary audiences and how successful that's been in bridging networks, in sharing information. Oh, and I'm going a little bit slow, so I will speed up a second. So that's it for the plenary. I'll talk about one more major activity that we are engaged in, and that is mapping underrepresented communities. So we want to understand the growth and development in community maturity around open science, mapping both technological and social indicators, what is supporting people in participating in open science. So there's a little bit of desk work involved, and this has been ongoing. This isn't something that's happening in the future, although it is continuing. We're going to identify EOSC services and resources used by various disciplinary communities using interviews with the RDA membership. We're also going to obtain feedback from community representatives and create outreach materials targeted to that feedback. The end result will be materials that are tailored to the communities that we've mapped, along with a final report summarizing the findings and the value that we see in those outputs. Through the map, we aim to create a rubric for evaluation that offers transparency in the evaluation process, which then hopefully can be applied to new communities and new situations, so that the mapping strategy itself becomes a tool that you can then use in the future to map new communities, because we aren't actually going to be able to map every disciplinary community as part of this effort. These are the ones that we are actually looking at specifically. Some of these came out of a previous report. There was an effort called RDA for EOSC. The ones that were targeted, and it's a little bit off. So communities targeted, the ones on your right there are communities added into our new mapping report. The ones that are on the left had previously been looked at. So we have some data about where they were back in 2021. We're going to look at where they are in 2023 and see some progress there, hopefully. And I think I might just cut it off there because I'm out of time.
Thank you very much, Beth. Okay, so next up we have Nina. Nina is part of Re3 Data, which I think you're all aware of, which is a service provider in EOSC. She is the Open Science Officer at Helmholtz in Berlin, and is managing a number of different projects. So, Nina.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in Prague and to finally meet the EOSC community in person as well, and not only see everyone digitally. So as introduced, I'm Nina Weisweiler. I'm working for the Helmholtz Open Science Office, and today I'm speaking to you in my role as the Community and Outreach Manager of the RE3Data COREF project. So I would like to introduce the RE3Data service rather quickly and show how it is positioned within the EOSC landscape, and also explain how we incorporate research data repositories into our activities as a registry. As you can see, RE3Data has been listed also in the EOSC portal marketplace, and this way we are now connected to the EOSC ecosystem and also visible and better findable for end users. And then there are currently one project, the EOSC Fair Impact, that RE3Data is involved in via the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, KIT. The KIT is hosting RE3Data for many years now, and it has been involved in the Fair project as well. In both of these projects, I think most of you know, the implementation of fair enabling tools and practices is fostered. For instance, in Fair, RE3Data metadata has been integrated into the DataCite Commons system, so now it's linked as part of the PID graph. And DataCite has also been a long-time partner of RE3Data, and it's involved in the Fair Core for EOSC project. So there's also some links to RE3Data. And I think that's like what I want to stress here. RE3Data as an infrastructure is somehow the connector between the repository data and the other infrastructures within EOSC. So we can see here that it's a central reference point for data for many other services. We work in close collaboration, for example, with the Fuji tool that is using RE3Data metadata. It's also used for monitoring activities, for discovery. So several purposes. These are just a few examples. In addition, our team also collaborates with various partners on the European level and also internationally, of course. So, for example, with the B2Find team, we have worked together on our implementation of the subject classifications. So we have been looking for a good solution and some harmonization as well. And if you would like to know a little bit more about the RE3Data subject classification, you can visit the project blog of COREF. I've linked this here. I hope the slides will be made available later because I put a lot of links in them. So, but I assume this will be the case. Then just to take a quick step back and look a little bit closer at what RE3Data actually does. I'm not sure if everyone here is so familiar with the service. So how does it actually help data repositories to become a part of EOSC, of the EOSC network? RE3Data covers all academic disciplines. It's a registry for research data repositories. So it does present repositories for permanent storage and access to research data. It's primarily aimed at researchers, but also funding bodies, publishers, scholarly institutions, also related infrastructures, as I've already pointed out. And it does promote a culture of sharing and better access, and also increased visibility for research data sets. It is the most comprehensive global index for data repositories. I think this number isn't even accurate anymore. It has risen a bit further, so we almost list 3,000 entries at the moment, which is nice because then I can add to this milestone that we have reached 3,000 in 2022. And also we are celebrating 10 years of RE3Data this year. We have already done some outreach activities around this. You can check out the DataCite blog to find a nice article about our anniversary. So RE3Data went live in 2012 and has since become the most comprehensive registry worldwide, actually. The service is currently involved in 2 projects, the aforementioned Fair Impact project and the RE3Data COREF project, which is funded by the German Research Foundation, DFG, that I'm also part of. currently, of the COREF project. And all partners in re3data, COREF, and in the re3data service have been working since the start together. If you would like to learn a bit more, I won't go into too much details here, but there's plenty material available. And what can you actually find in re3data? So we do apply a very broad definition for what we call a repository. However, we are aware that this term, let's call it, is a little bit like fuzzy. But this is like just our definition to approach this concept that is made in our metadata schema. And to be registered in re3data, a repository has to be run by a legal entity, for example, a sustainable institution such as a library or a university. It has to clarify its access conditions to the data and needs some terms of use. And of course, it has to have a focus on research data. However, the term research data we also define relatively broadly here. The infrastructures that are described in re3data are applied, or we apply a comprehensive metadata schema to those infrastructures. We have a team of editors that index the infrastructures when someone suggests them or when they discover some new ones themselves. And they describe them according to, for example, general, technical, legal, organizational aspects. And all these properties can also be visited or filtered on the website of re3data. The schema is available online under a CC0 license, so this is also valid for all our data, so people can easily reuse the data for other purposes. And each entry in re3data receives a DOI via DataSite. Our editors take care that the metadata in re3data is correct, complete, and up to date. However, we do rely on users and repository operators to suggest changes. So if you notice anything that's missing or that should be updated, then go ahead and please notify us. That's easily to be done via the website. So much for data input. Of course, we also want to help our users apply or reuse re3data metadata. So there's an API if you don't want to use the web interface. And we have, as part of the COREF project, put together some use case examples in R that can be found on our GitHub repository and that can be adapted to other use cases as well. And if you have questions around this, if there's like someone who wants to reuse the data and is not sure how to use the API or what to do with it, people can also always contact our team. Finally, this is our plan for the COREF project. We work on several levels here to further develop and enhance the re3data service and to connect it with other services and tools. I'm not going into detail here. I just wanted to point out the different activities that we have been doing as part of COREF to engage with the repository community and also with our end users. So you can see that we have done a lot of workshops and surveys. Also, we always do a request for comments process when a new version of the metadata schema is published, so people can give a lot of feedback, which is then implemented. And of course, that's what I'm responsible for, all the well-known outreach methods like blogging, mailings, and social media, and so on. That's nothing new, but I think, we are very, for us, it's really important to engage with the community and to make sure that we represent the repositories in a right way for them. So on a last note, I think maybe all or most of you saw the email with the executive summary draft for the European Research Data Landscape Study, which will be discussed tomorrow in a session, I think. And the study found that the share of researchers who store data in research data repositories is still too low, or lower as we want it to be. And it does also recommend that repositories are indexed in Re3 data and keep their information in the registry up to date, because this is one way to help people improve their research data management activities and to find the right repository, and thus to increase the number that, I think this is a goal that we all want to achieve. So Re3 data does help repositories to be included in the overarching discovery and monitoring systems, such as OpenAIR's Open Science Observatory, as I pointed out in the beginning. And if you're interested in a collaboration with Re3 data or reusing any of this data, then also please go ahead and let us know. And with this, I'm going to finish my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nina. So I'd like to invite Julia from OpenAIR's Outreach Manager.
Okay, thanks, Nashra. Okay, so OpenAIR is involved in EOSC Future, also in the outreach and engagement part. And what we are doing is to collaborate with other e-infrastructures as AGI, GEONT, and UDAT. But what is e-infrastructures? I'm not sure who you are in the audience, so I will explain. The infrastructure are part of the research infrastructures and are those who comprehend the digital infrastructures technologies, for instance, hardware or software, resources as data, services, digital libraries, and also that are contributing in the communication, such as protocols, access rights, network, and of course the people and the organization that are managing these services. In the EOSC Future, at the moment, these are the organizations that are collaborating most in some of the key components of EOSC Future. So what we did is that in the last August, it was decided to create this 4 focus group that Najla mentioned at the start of the project. At the start of the session. So it was agreed to create this 4 focus group, and one of these was this one of the infrastructure that I'm going to present today. We started the activities from September, in which we discussed the value proposition of the EOSC Future components. And more in depth, we start a more engaging discussion by organizing a 2-day webinar on October 2022. And we involved the national infrastructures that are part of the network of our organizations, OpenAIR, AGI, GEONT, and UDAT. We invite the NRANS, the NOAD for OpenAIR, the NGI, to participate and to discuss about what they were perceiving as good activities or challenges, or how to share good practices that are already in place at the national level. And in the future, we are going to continue this consultation in other components of the EOSC Future. So, what did we learn in October? So we start by explaining what was EOSC Core at the EOSC Future level, and it's the part of the EOSC that it's providing the essential and internal services that are the kind of basic for the functioning of EOSC. So are those services that are helping all other tools to share, access, combine, and support the research through the Open Science Cloud. But then we asked to the infrastructures what they have at the national level as core services and how they were perceiving the EOSC core. And the answer was that EOSC is perceived as a federation of fair data and related services. And interesting, most of the infrastructure's representative were thinking that the data are the key elements for them that are even on top of the services. And this is because most of the infrastructures have already some services that are developed inside their own institution. And what they would like is to have a more federated data spaces. And this is how the EOSC is perceived. It was interesting also to hear, for instance, from Czech Republic, that they have the fear that if they are promoting too much the services, they are going to slow down what is the actual efforts they make to the EOSC. So they prefer to have more metadata, more guidance on how to share the data, and a little bit less on the services that are surrounding. There are some components of the EOSC core in particular that were perceived as very good, as for instance the AAI, and as potentially very good for them as the help desk, or the help desk was seen as the highest potential, but they felt that it's not really mature at this stage for the moment. They also comment that the onboarding should be simplified. And for them, this is a big challenge on onboarding data and services. And also the accounting or some other services were perceived either immature or not for their immediately use. And it also was a bit harsh, but some of the infrastructure say that what they really want in EOSC is to see professional services rather than pilots, because I think that in these years we did a lot of pilots. Okay, so the exchange instead is basically composed about the horizontal services, and they are the ones that are made in collaboration. And the comments was, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need so many services. We need to know what is inside. So what kind of services can be of use for the infrastructures. The biggest challenge they feel is that there is a lot of resistance in the research community and a lack of knowledge in open science and their practices. This is why they feel that even if they have this kind of services, they have difficulties on really make the people use them. The value proposition in this case was to recognize EOSC as a place where people can publish data and services, and don't have to push the resources into the portal, but make easier that this process is happening automatically. And I will go for the interoperability framework. This is the part of the EOSC that is dedicated to how make the services interoperable. And this is happening thanks to the interoperability guidelines. And there was a big debate here because there are several interoperable guidelines, and they are different between the services, data, and the domains specific. The issue is how we can make one unique interoperable guideline when there are so many fragmented initiatives. So maybe we don't need to embed all these guidelines, but just the ones that are making sense for improvement. The Knowledge Hub is the learning platform that is also collecting training catalogs and all the trainings that are related to the services and catalogs that you can see in the EOSC. There are several strengths and challenges at the national level because there are several training catalogs that are already built at the national level or also on the local level. What was required is that the people that are much into that, they would like to have some metadata schemas and avoid the duplication of efforts in a way that also the training catalog can be interoperable. And finally, we discussed about the EOSC Observatory. That is a policy intelligence tool for monitoring, tracking, policies, investment, resources, and infrastructures related in EOSC. Again, what was the discussion here? There is a very different way to perceive or to monitoring the activities in EOSC, and they need like a sort of hub in which they can share the good practices and they can discuss about the good initiatives they can replicate in their own countries or try to find support and investment, not only in terms of funding, but also in terms of human capital to improve the policy and the monitoring at the European level. And with this, I'm stopping, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia. So I'm going to...
So thanks, Nejla. So the white paper will be published later this year, hopefully. The theme is coordination and cooperation among infrastructures. So I've been involved in the area of infrastructures for more than 20 years with different organizations and many different projects. A brief introduction about ERG. The Infrastructure Reflection Group has been working for almost 20 years at this transnational cross-sectoral engagement of infrastructures. It's a policy advisory body in the area of infrastructures, and I agree with Julia on the definition. So infrastructure are about networking, computing, data infrastructures, and related services. So, and this is also in line with the EOSC glossary definition. The vision and mission of ERG are about facilitating the integration in the area of infrastructures, and the mission, of course, is the related policy making and recommendations and related documents, white papers, roadmaps that ERG is producing. The ERG Infrastructure Commons is one of the foundations of EOSC, so it can be considered as the integrated ecosystem of the resources and services that is open, user-friendly, and accessible to European researchers. You see the layers at the bottom with the networking, computing data, and the related services, and the thematic infrastructures using the horizontal ones. So EOSC can be considered having two main components, the ERG Commons and the Open Science one. And there was a document that we published already in 2014 about a marketplace for infrastructure services. And this extended the idea of the ERG Commons and contributed to the definition of EOSC, having several of its key concepts like the catalog of services, the search facility, services from research and commercial services, compliance, and so on. So, yes. So moving now to cooperation and coordination among the infrastructures. There have been several high-level bodies working on, let's say, providing recommendations on the coordination, starting from earlier years, 2017-18 on EOSC, and then later on the new European research area. I think you heard some of these in the plenary by the Commission this morning. So increasing the level of national and European coordination, in particular on RIs and infrastructures, and also on the ERA governance. There is the ERA Action 8 on research infrastructures as part of the policy agenda, which specifically talks about increased cooperation between RIs, infrastructures, and other stakeholders, including through EOSC. So ERG has been giving advice on coordination and cooperation for several years, focusing mostly at the national level, and you see some of the documents there. So the national notes document and the white paper from last year. So this year, we'll be focusing at the coordination at the European level. So, of course, you heard already some of the developments, and I'm glad to see some more cooperation happening between the infrastructure projects. And, there have been, of course, two significant initiatives, EOSC and EuroHPC, in the last years, which are well underway, but still coordination across all of these players is at an early stage, especially between EuroHPC and EOSC, for the benefit, of course, of the end users. So the aim of the white paper is to bridge these gaps and providing some advice and recommendations on cooperation among all stakeholders. And of course, the outcome, as I said, is in the long run to provide integrated user-friendly services for the researchers. You see already in 2013, almost 10 years ago, there was a document by ERG, the white paper by that time, saying that for integrated service provision, a clear separation between three core functions is needed. So the first one is community building and strategy setting. The second one is service provision, and the third one is innovation. And as part of the first one, there is this forum for coordination between the major infrastructure components. Of course, it wasn't mature, let's say, to implement this, but I think now time is ripe, and so there is some more progress, as I will tell you in the next slides. So there has been the process for the white paper. There has been a dedicated meeting with the Commission last December. There has been also a link with the EOSC steering board. Then there was the May ERG workshop, a virtual one, which had a dedicated session on cooperation. There was a questionnaire prepared and sent to all infrastructure stakeholders in August this year, and the answers have been received in 2 batches in September, and the last ones have been received last week and also one this week. So a brief analysis of the white paper questionnaire. The first question was who was filling in. So I think the list is down there, the ones who answered. Jean, Praise, the EOSC Steering Board, EU Data, Open Air, the EOSC Association, and EGI. So one area in the questionnaire was the governance of infrastructures and the strategy setting and coordination. And the one concrete question was about the infrastructure umbrella forum. So a forum among representatives of all these infrastructures. And the vast majority of answers received so far is very positive. So covering all infrastructures, including, of course, scholarly communications. The EOSC Steering Board proposed to use existing channels like the EOSC Association or the ESFRI Stakeholder Forum or the upcoming ESFRI probably task force on EOSC. Regarding representation of users in this forum, this is also favored, but of course it's difficult to include all the different types of users in the forum. So possibly this will be done by the ESFRI and the ESFRI Stakeholder Forum. There was another question about whether a technical operational forum is needed, a separate one from the strategy setting, and there have been mixed answers, so some are positive and some negative. So possibly some elements of this operational forum will be included in the strategy setting one. So the next area was about compatible policies, interoperable services, and operational aspects. So this is quite similar to the open air slides. In fact, I was amazed. And one question was about computing and resource access models, which are different in HPC and HTC. This is still, let's say, immature, but there is some work on praise on this. For example, a lightweight peer review evaluation for artificial intelligence resources, so it's much faster than the traditional, let's say, peer review process of the high performance computing resources. Regarding the Charter of Access, I think everybody was very positive, and this forum can possibly contribute to this forum. Regarding coordination with industry, again, mixed answers, some positive, some negative. Some other points referred to was the help desk, as Julia also mentioned, for technical support, and also some joint training capacity planning among infrastructures. Another area was cost and business models, funding and sustainability. Regarding cost models and methodology, this is, of course, a very difficult point. Mixed answers, and more work is needed. Regarding collecting best practices, everybody was very positive. And regarding sustained funding, all the infrastructure said that they are working in this direction. Regarding barriers and obstacles for cross-infrastructure activities, there were different points mentioned, different legal and funding environments, administrative barriers rooted with the funding of resources, fragmented environments, different types of actors, from networking to computing to scholarly communication, and so on. And other challenges, keeping the talent shortage, and also there was an idea of a joint research and development program for new innovative services across the infrastructures. So the current status is that we are still analyzing the answers we just received. We are a bit late because several of the infrastructures answered late. The analysis, the full analysis, it will be presented next month here in Prague, where the next ERG workshop will take place. And there was also a session at the EGI conference at the closing plenary, and there were representatives from the infrastructure that you see in the screen, and most of them agree to start with a lightweight forum very soon. So the conclusions: cooperation and coordination is required across the whole federation chain, institutional, national, regional, and European, and global, of course. Infrastructure is willing to start with the infrastructure umbrella forum that I mentioned for coordination and strategy settings. Also, infrastructure may need to go beyond the vested interest and comfort zones. I think this is a bit provocative, but this is for the benefit of the users. And another provocative statement: is federation enough, or we should start talking some more about integration, at least by 2030, and hopefully we'll conclude the white paper by the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Fotis. Okay, we have our last speaker, Peter, who is the CTO of Elixir.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. So I should not be here at all. So a number of reasons. First of all, these slides have been kindly prepared by Volmar Eckerström from Elixir Sweden. I am not Volmar Eckerström, and I am not from Elixir Sweden. So there's a start. Of course, as Nadia said, these slides are on behalf of the EOSC Semantic Interoperability Task Force, who've been looking at use cases and their effectiveness. And I am not a member of the EOSC Semantic Interoperability Task Force either. So it's getting worse, but it does get better. So I'm Peter McCallum. I'm the Chief Technical Officer at Elixir, the central organizing hub of Elixir. And Elixir is an S3 life science research infrastructure for data and tools across the biological sciences. And of course, we feel that case studies and use cases are important, and I'm going to show you how important we feel they are in just a moment. But we're here to to express the opinion of the task force and Volmar's thinking on this, and to maybe make a call for help as well towards the end of this talk also. So first of all, I promised that we were committed to the idea of use cases. I've talked about use cases, and I've talked about case studies as well already, and those are two different terms. They mean something quite different, and I hope we'll explain what those mean. But these are all about the different journeys that users go on and how we write down those journeys and what they're useful for. Why is it useful to write down these user journeys? They're useful for demonstrating the value of a system. They're useful for engaging your stakeholders. And for those of us who are developing systems, they're useful for requirements gathering as well. So hopefully on the way through these slides, we'll demonstrate why we believe that. But in particular, the use cases are a way for us to focus on communities. And within Elixir, we know this. We've had EU projects with use cases built in from our early days participating in EU programs. We're a research infrastructure, and we have technology at the heart. A lot of these technologies are EOSC technologies or overlap with EOSC technologies. So you see around data, you see around compute, and around interoperability services as well. But we realized quite early on in Elixir's growth that the user communities and the use cases that we were developing were more than just a valuable asset. They were part of the organization, and so important to us that we spend money on them. We constantly spend money on our Elixir communities, and we have a defined set. We now have 17. This rather nice slide dates from when we had slightly fewer. But you can see our different user communities are represented there. And they allow us to do two things: to demonstrate that our technology is useful, and of course to outreach to the users and let the users know about that technology. Semantic interoperability is a particular case where you're looking at the interfaces between technologies and the interfaces between users, and you need to create a common language. So we find it critical when looking at our interoperability services to develop stories around how our services fit together and how those use cases demonstrate the value there. We in Elixir also see interoperability as being a key part of our platform. So we've been looking into this in parallel to the sustainability, the semantic interoperability task force's work here. How has it looked for Elixir? Well, we make our communities write white papers right at the beginning of their journey, and that gives us a definition, effectively a super use case of everything that they're interested in, as kind of their ticket to entry into the Elixir community system. And as you can see from this chronograph here, many of our communities have been operating and working on our behalf for 4 years or more since their early days. And the list continues to grow, and those communities develop over time. So what are the use cases for? What do the use cases do? Well, they demonstrate value, and use cases are used across the computing industry. They develop different types of value. So they can be used for product sales. If you have a thing that exists already, you use it to demonstrate what it can be used for. They can be used for development projects. So they're used within EOSC projects to drive the choice of technology in the way that you develop those projects. And then they can be used to communicate to your stakeholders. So in healthcare, the user stories are used to demonstrate that we're meeting the policy requirements and to reassure people that there's a purpose to what we're doing. A really good use case will service a number of different people. So it will serve to let your product be demonstrated to the end users themselves. The users can recognize themselves in your use cases. So when you build the use case, you want to make sure that it uses a language which is specialized to demonstrate the benefit, but there's also general enough that people from other communities can see themselves in those use cases. But then the other thing, and we think the thing that is often missed, is that those of you who are building technology need to be able to take the use case and understand it and turn it into usable technology. So that you can see the full picture. And this includes the stakeholder environment, the funding environment, as well as the direct usage of the tool or the software or the data. So we think it's important that the best use cases work on both sides of this. And then finally, how do we know we have enough use cases? Well, within EOSC, we have the advantage that we already have good domain mapping, we already have interest groups, we already have the science clusters around EOSC. So they, between them, will make sure that we have enough representation across the landscape. And trust me, those who are responsible for building the EU funding programs, you know, make sure that policy area is covering all the stakeholders across Europe. And do we have use cases already? Yes, of course we have. But many of these use cases are impact stories. So they're targeted at telling the funders how good our technology is and outreaching to the public. That's only one part of it. We feel that a good use case is also to be used for driving technology development and technology selection. So what do we want to do? Well, first of all, we've got case studies and use cases. So case studies are important because they demonstrate what's real. So you could talk to people about what they currently do to solve a problem or how they currently use your technology to solve a problem. So that's critical. And I think if you're not finding case studies, you should be suspicious, right? Because the case studies demonstrate that people really are using these platforms and using these tools. But then there are use cases which may not be things that you can do now. And there are different types of use cases at high level and low level, and they all have their value. So the use cases may be things that you can't do today, that you want to do with a technology that's going to be developed. They can be focused on the business need. How do stakeholders want to get together? What do funders want to pay for? What are people trying to achieve that they can't achieve today? Or they can be more task-focused. So how do I use this platform? Can I get my data from here to here? And those individual use cases are also valuable. We're not advocating for one level or the other. Within the Semantic Interoperability Task Force, of course, the participants in the task force are interested in building models, but they feel that those conceptual models, once they've picked out the right high-level entities, will allow the different use cases to be compared. And this is one of the things that the task force are trying to achieve. They also believe, of course, that those conceptual models will then be applicable more widely across the rest of EOSC. So, what do we need to do? We want to capture some case studies and some use cases. So really, what the task force are doing is going out to the stakeholder community to find representative examples. And that work is ongoing and was built into the Semantic Interoperability Charter. What they then want to do with those use cases is not simply put them on a website, but using this conceptual model to index them so people can find them on theme, can find them on technology, can find them on problem type, so that we can look across those use cases in a more structured way. And we want to make sure that we represent the full EOSC community, so not just the end users, not just the infrastructure providers, but all the different stakeholders across the piece. Identify any gaps, any unrepresented participants, and make sure the task force is looking across all the journeys. And what would this look like? Well, already the charter of the task force had a set of communities that they were going to reach out to. And you'll find that on the EOSC Association website, the task force charter lists all the different communities and science clusters that they want to target. So if you find yourself among there and you haven't yet been approached by the Semantic Interoperability Task Force, you can expect the knock on your door. And then what they are doing is building up a template for these user stories. And this is the critical part of this work that they want to advertise at this point, which is building a framework for use cases so that they can be more easily compared with each other, building a common language for the use cases so that use cases can be cross-referenced and reused. And so for people in the other task forces, for people in the research engagement activity, please reach out to the task force and start looking at this and saying, well, does this meet my needs? Can I use this to help me develop a technology? Can I use this as the framework for my own use case development? So, what would they like to do? First of all, they'd like the whole association to participate in this journey. So coordinating and steering across all the task forces would be better if all the task forces had a kind of shared vision and could follow this message. Somebody somewhere could conveniently host a shared task force catalog. So making sure that these case studies, as they develop, either in one place or in multiple places, but indexed in a central place, would increase their visibility and avoid redundant effort and use case gathering. And then for the people gathering the use cases themselves, the task force are developing best practices. They would love to share that with the other task forces. They'd love to share it with the researcher engagement task force if that's possible. And then through all of this, to liaise between the EOSC projects and the task forces to make sure that this work is non-redundant and is having as much impact as possible. So I hope I've done Volmar's slides credit. If you want to talk more about Elixir, I'm the person to talk to. If you want to talk more about the EOSC Semantic Interoperability Task Force, Volmar looks like that, and those are his contact details. Perfect. And I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. It was a very good overview. Thanks for keeping to time. So we have about 10 minutes now, 15 minutes. Does this microphone work? Sorry, I've got microphone paranoia. Okay. Many different themes, many different stakeholders. How do we draw a common thread? It's quite a challenge. Would anyone from the audience like to make a start and answer that question, or ask any of the individuals on the panel a question to start with? Were there any questions from the individual talks that anyone would like to? I see a hand up. Yes. Do we have? Okay. That'll be the microphone for the back of the room, and then.
Yeah, it's just a question about RE3 data, because I find it hard nowadays, currently, to direct researchers without any warning to RE3 data to find a repository. Because while it's great as a reference for individual repositories with an identity card and with a reference number, we have to build separate lists for recommended repositories and so on. So I wondered if in CoRef there was any plan to bring a service to make the best out of this great tool, but which is really large and really horizontal, if you forgive this word.
Sure. Okay. Can you hear me like this? All right. Yeah. Thank you for the question. That is an issue that we are confronted with actually quite often, and that's also why we have thought about how to solve this. And as part of CoRef, a new metadata schema was published in August, so last August, and we have introduced a new profile feature in there, or a new profile property that is supposed to enable the building of like sub-communities or sub-selections within RE3 data, but this is still in the implementation phase. So the schema has to be implemented first technically, and then we can like work this out as a proper feature in the platform. But this is definitely on our agenda.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Thanks. Actually, it's about from the last talk, but also maybe for the other panelists, especially if you are working with use cases or case studies, which is actually good to finally figure out what was the difference. From my experience, often people want to only present the positive things on these things. And to me, usually the best result is actually negative, that you know what should be corrected. Have you encountered this kind of thing or do you feel a pressure when presenting a use case to present it in the most positive possible way? Or if you are kind of coordinating these, how could you kind of get also the, let's say, the riskier use cases to apply and be happy with being failures?
So I'll have a go at that first, of course. So I would distinguish here an EU project use case, which to some extent has to be decorated, nurtured, and then presented in its best light towards the end. I mean, that's reasonable, and that's what everyone expects. What we've done with the Elixir communities is kind of different. We've asked them what is wrong, and so the white paper they produce is a genuine warts and all representation of what they need. And if you're developing a piece of software, and this is why we distinguish case studies, which may be the kind of glossy picture of what you can do, from a use case which may be, well, here's how I do it today, and it's awful, and there's lots of command line stuff, and my data has to get manually manipulated, which are all the problems our researchers are working with. Those are very important. I don't have anywhere to deposit my data. These problems are the ones that drive Elixir's development, and I think these are the ones that EOSC needs as well. Not the advertising use cases, which have their role, not the impact use cases, which have their role, but the I'm really stuck, this doesn't work use cases, which drive development. I think that's absolutely the case, yeah.
Marek and then Julia.
Yeah, I can just support that. We have two kinds. If I want to attract people and to show them how good EOSC or whatever repository is, I use the best example. On the other hand, for example, we are in our working group selecting electronic lab notebooks we would like to support in our work, in our community. And there, of course, everyone, the aim is to show the troubles of available electronic lab notebooks. So within our community, we are using them. If the developers would like to have it, we would provide it, but we are not going back to them to discourage them from their development, showing them this is not working, this is not working. So this is really two sides of the same coin.
I would like to thank Ari for this question because it's not an easy answer. Usually when you are looking for actively for a use case, of course it's easier that you know an enthusiastic person than the one that is showing the frustration. And this is depending also on the way you are interviewing the people. For instance, I never thought about, but I will do, to find the use case through the help desk. This is something that I will try to do. Maybe I will ask my colleagues to help if they will not hit me before. But this is something that actually we are not doing actively. Actively, we are looking for the good case, and this is a reality, or for bigger use of a service. For instance, for founders, for research initiatives, because they understand better open science. Those who are failing is that because they maybe not have enough support or training behind. And this is also what happens when we interviewed the infrastructures, that they said that the biggest resistance was in the researchers. It's because they lack of knowledge or they lack of understanding of the service itself, because the language that we are using is still a bias. So sometimes the issue is a vocabulary issue more than the service itself.
This isn't really an answer about use cases, but I'll just throw it in here. When constructing the survey for RDA, I'm not tall enough. It's going to be aimed at my forehead. Thanks. Constructing the survey and thinking about the interview questions for RDA, it's very easy to ask, well, what's wrong? and forget to ask that, what do you like? What excites you about participating in EOSC? What are the services that you actually enjoy using? So yeah, just when you're thinking about what kinds of answers you want, sometimes you can be really focused on what you think the problems are, and you don't want that to be reflected in what you produce in your use cases or in the questions you ask in a survey.
So I was going to add just one more thing, an advert for the concept of the domain ambassador as well, because although we talk about communities and use cases as if they were users, we rarely talk to users. It's very expensive to talk to individual users. We talk to the experts who provide the specialized services to the users, who were users but got drawn into EOSC or whatever, those people. And the domain ambassadors are kind of in this ground as well. I think that approach is very important and I think worth investing in. And I'm not a domain ambassador, so I can say it.
Okay. Can I just, to come back to that, because I think that's very interesting, specifically for Beth and Marek, do you think in your outreach work, I mean, Marek, you were saying that the resources are scattered, it's quite difficult to do the outreach. Be totally honest, is the messaging from EOSC clear? What you're going to take to them about EOSC, is it clear? How could we make it clearer? Be as frank as you want, because that's a huge part of our engagement, and we still need to get there. So
yeah, definitely. But there are two things. One thing is that EOSC, it would be great that the resources are somehow attracted to EOSC marketplace, but on the other hand, the communities, research communities, are working as to some extent as clubs, and so they need to have their club hall. And in this club hall, they need to get all the information. Otherwise, if they go to the generic resources such as EOSC Marketplace, usually these are the experts, data stewards will use EOSC Marketplace, but we need to target the users, the researchers. We need to show them straight ahead, use this. Or here are 3 options which we recommend. But we cannot tell them, go to EOSC Marketplace and find your resource, because they will simply not do it. If they are forced, of course, sometimes they are forced now with Horizon Europe and the other, but they will only do it for what is necessary. What I would love to see is that all data are there available. Not only those which were selected for deliverables and milestones and some publications. I was yesterday just saying in open air session, we should change the philosophy. What needs to be published are data sets, and on top of these data sets, we will produce publications, articles, which are just interpretation of data sets, and these could be many interpretation of the same data set. Yeah? But the data sets, better and worse, should be at least for some time available for a research community. And for this, researchers will do it if it will be easy. If it's straightforward, if it just goes there to the repository and they don't have to think about what should I use, go somewhere and search. As I said, this is fantastic for data stewards and open science officers and so on. This is a playground for them.
So speaking as a Canadian who didn't know anything about the European Open Science Cloud 1 year ago, no, EOSC didn't make a lot of sense to me. And the messaging around it, for the longest time, I was like, well, it's a website. I see there's a portal, there's services that are aggregated in said website, and this looks very useful. I've since come to understand that it's a lot more than the portal, that EOSC is an entity, a collection of providers and services and people who are excited about open science and want to participate and want to connect with researchers within their communities and across other communities, and that there are various levels of enthusiasm that have seen people successfully do that. And then there are people who have a sense that EOSC has something to offer them, but they're they're not sure what tools or where to look or what exactly EOSC can do for them. And I'm not sure that I still have the clear, or that I've figured out what the clear messaging is in order to get there, but I agree that they need pathways. They need to be able to see what other researchers have done so that they can just talk to people who are doing similar work and say, well, did this work for you? Is it worth my time to learn this tool? Because I have a million other things to do. And if that tool does work in the way that I need it to work, great, I will use it, and now I see the value of EOSC.
Yeah, if I may add, I couldn't agree more. I think there needs to be a clear definition of EOSC and also a vision of what should be coming. So what is it for the users? What is it for the providers? We need to delineate, let's say, the components that are part of EOSC. Do we have network? No. Do we have middleware? We have a bit of middleware with AI. Do we have computing? This was a big discussion whether computing is part of EOSC or not. Apparently, the high throughput computing is. And of course, I think the main point also from my presentation is that the user shouldn't really care about whether something is coming from EUDAT or OpenAir or EGI. We need to talk about all the infrastructures come together and provide somehow work together and provide integrated services, integrated help desk, integrated something. So I think we need to get into this mood. And of course, we need the steering from the high-level boards to provide a clear definition, delineate EOSC, what is it not, and have a plan so that the users can engage. And also, I agree. We need to have case studies, use cases, what can be done more. I think there was an S3 workshop in January on the added value for users from EOSC, and I think we heard there, and I was surprised a bit that the younger generation wants new tools. There are some personalized dashboards in the industry, and they want to see modern tools, while the older generation may want to stick with their own, command line or whatever interfaces they're using. But we need to be flexible, and there are different speeds, different needs, different. So and it's Europe, of course, which is a different kind of needs and realities in each country. So.
Can I just invite all of you that have been here today, also the speakers, to the next session that we will have on the 5th and the 6th of December, that will show some use case from the EOSC future environment. So it will be nice that we continue this discussion later on.
Okay. Anything else from anybody else before we... Margot, libraries.
I'm one of the people who have to sort of sell the EOSC to real researchers. And then usually what we do is we try to explain it. It's like one of these commercial services, but not like these commercial services, but because behind it is science itself. And this sort of makes sense. And what I'm trying to grasp is as many stories that we can use. So for instance, the story of PubMed Central makes sense to everybody in life sciences, that it really makes sense to sort of standardize your stuff, because then it can be picked up by a central infrastructure, or that it makes sense to use an ORCID because it standardizes your name. And so this could be really helpful to, and maybe it sounds a bit too lay for you, because you've been working on the EOSC for ages, and Najla has been working on stuff like this since I know her, and that's for a long, long time. So the people like us who are the multipliers of information, we really need catchy stories so that we can translate the stuff and turn it into pigeon EOSC explanation.
Thank you. Okay, in the interest of time, I think we need to wrap up. Is there anything else The next pearl of wisdom or anything, anyone, any observation? A personal question. Yes.
I was surprised to learn about the EOSC future focus groups.
Yes. Okay. That's good. Yeah, they're internal in the consortium of EOSC Future. We just started them. They're nothing public yet. I just wanted to say that we're starting to put our head around this. And yeah, okay. So I think Pigeon EOSC is the main takeaway. But also, no, I think I don't know if there's anyone from the association or anyone from the task force on researcher engagement in the room. Okay, but you are. So, okay, would you like to take on board Peter's and Volmar's suggestion of these use cases? I don't know.
They're already being discussed, yes.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm from the task force research engagement as well, and one of the subgroups is actually developing a template to come up with such use cases.
Okay. So you'll liaise with the semantic interoperability task force. Good. Okay. Good, thank you. And also that bottom-up ambassadorial work helps within the disciplines and on campus is also a good approach. Okay, so please please join me in giving our wonderful panel, all 6 of them, a round of applause, and thank you very much for your insights. I hope it was a fruitful event.